The room froze the moment Ashley Hartwell leaned toward the microphone, her perfect white smile sharpening like a blade. "Sweetheart," she said, loud enough for the entire hall to hear, "even you must know piano isn't a toy for people like you." Gasps scattered across the gold-trimmed venue as 14-year-old Aaliyah tightened her grip on her white cane. She couldn't see the crowd, but she could feel every ounce of their judgment slicing into her skin. If this already made your blood boil, tap like, and subscribe so you don't miss stories where justice finally wins. Ashley wasn't done. She tilted her chin, letting the spotlight catch her diamond necklace. "Come on," she continued, voice dripping with fake kindness. "Play something simple. Maybe Happy Birthday?" A few elite guests snickered behind champagne glasses. In their world, a blind black girl standing near a Steinway piano was nothing but an unwanted interruption, a diversity ornament accidentally placed too close to the stage. Aaliyah swallowed hard. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears, loud enough to drown out the murmurs. She had been invited here only because her public school received 2 free tickets. No one knew her name. No one cared. And the woman mocking her wasn't just any pianist. Ashley Hartwell was the star of the night. Famous, adored, celebrated. A woman who built her reputation on flawless performances and flawless arrogance. Aaliyah shifted her cane, the polished marble floor slick under her shoes. The air smelled like expensive perfume and silent cruelty. She felt bodies leaning, watching, waiting for her to crumble. She lived through years of whispers, but never in a room this bright or this cold. Ashley stepped closer, heels clicking like a countdown. "Don't be shy," she said. "Our donors are very generous. They're practically begging to see what talent looks like in less privileged communities." Laughter rippled through the hall. Thin, sharp, humiliating. Aaliyah's fingers twitched, not from fear, from memory. Hours of practice on a borrowed keyboard in her aunt's living room. Nights spent tracing Braille sheet music until her fingertips went numb. Years of being ignored, underestimated, dismissed. Ashley couldn't see any of that. She only saw a blind girl with nothing to offer. Aaliyah lifted her chin, facing the direction of the piano. Her voice was soft, steady, impossible to ignore. "I don't play children's songs." The entire hall went silent. Even Ashley blinked, once slow, confused. Aaliyah's next word sliced through the room. "Pick something difficult." The crowd shifted. Something was happening. Something Ashley wasn't prepared for. Aaliyah stood there, steady but silent, while the murmur spread like a cold breeze across the hall. She kept her chin lifted. But inside, her thoughts drifted far from the glittering stage and the judgment filling the room. They drifted home, back to the cramped apartment where music was the only light that cut through her darkness. Her Aunt Danielle used to say, "Baby, blindness didn't take your vision. It only sharpened it differently." And she meant it. Aaliyah grew up in a neighborhood where sirens replaced lullabies, but the church basement had an old keyboard with broken keys. She didn't need perfect instruments. She needed sound, vibration, and memory. That was enough. It always had been. Most people never saw her hours of practice. They didn't see her running her fingertips over Braille sheets until the pages softened. They didn't see her memorizing full symphonies note by note because she had no other choice. They only saw a girl with a cane, a girl who didn't belong in rooms with chandeliers worth more than her entire building. Tonight, those same people watched her like she was a mistake standing in the middle of their perfection. A well-dressed couple whispered behind her, "She shouldn't even be here. Why do they keep letting them into these events?" A sting hit her chest, familiar, unwelcome, but not new. She had felt this in classrooms, grocery stores, buses. Racism didn't always scream. Sometimes it whispered behind manicured nails and forced smiles. But something deeper pulled her mind away from the noise. A memory, a voice, a lesson she wasn't sure she should reveal yet. She remembered the man who taught her the first real concerto she ever played. He wasn't famous. He wasn't rich. He wasn't white. He worked at the community center, fixing instruments and giving free lessons to kids who couldn't afford anything else. He taught her how to hear music in silence, how to feel chords through the keys, how to listen for things other people missed. His last words are echoed in her head now. One day, you won't need eyes to shock a room. Your sound will do it for you. Aaliyah exhaled slowly. Maybe that day was tonight. She lifted her hand toward the piano bench, fingertips trembling, not with fear, but with something she refused to say out loud. Something Ashley would never see coming. If this happened in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you stand for fairness, hit subscribe. Ashley crossed her arms, watching with a smirk as Aaliyah stepped closer to the instrument, blind, calm, and carrying a silence heavy enough to unsettle the entire hall. No one there understood what she was about to reveal. Not yet. Ashley's heels clicked sharply against a marble as she circled the piano like a predator pretending to be a tutor. The crowd watched her every move, their excitement rising, not for music, but for humiliation. In rooms like this, cruelty was entertainment, as long as it came from the right color and the right status. All right then, Ashley said, loud enough for every table to hear. Since you're feeling brave tonight, how about we make this interesting? Her tone sharpened the way glass does before it breaks. Aaliyah stood still, cane in one hand, breath steady. She couldn't see Ashley's smile, but she could feel it, the kind that stretches too wide, hiding something poisonous behind it. Ashley flicked her wrist dramatically. You said you don't play children's songs. She leaned closer. Fine, then prove you can play anything at all. A few men in tailored suits chuckled. Someone muttered, "This'll be good." Another whispered, "She's about to embarrass herself." Champagne glasses clinked quietly, like the room was toasting her downfall before it even happened. Ashley tapped a polished finger on the lid of the piano. Play a piece chosen by this audience. We're all very curious what your talent looks like. Aaliyah's jaw tightened. She'd been challenged before. Teachers who thought she needed special help. Students who thought she was inspirational until she outperformed them. Strangers who assumed blindness meant inability. But never a room this large. Never a crowd this eager to watch her fail. Ashley raised one eyebrow. Or she let the pause stretch long enough for the crowd to lean in. You can back out now. No shame in admitting you overreached. The hall hummed with judgment. Aaliyah could hear every whispered insult, every breath held in anticipation. Racism didn't need volume. The smirk in Ashley's voice carried enough of it. Aaliyah lifted her chin. I said I'd play. Pick something. Ashley laughed, too hard, too fake. Wonderful. She turned toward the rows of guests. Any suggestions for our guest performer? Voices echoed back. Moonlight Sonata. No, Liszt. Let's see her panic. Play Chopin. She'll never pull it off. One voice, deep and amused, said louder than the rest, let her try Rachmaninoff. The room erupted, half in disbelief, half in delight. Rachmaninoff wasn't a test. It was a trap. Even seasoned professionals hesitated before performing it. Ashley grinned. Perfect. Rachmaninoff it is. Aaliyah's fingers twitched at her side. That's a complicated choice, Ashley said sweetly. Sure you don't want to choose something simpler? Aaliyah stepped toward the bench. I said, she repeated softly, pick something difficult. The hall went still again, quieter, colder. A tension crackled in the air, the kind that comes right before something breaks. Ashley felt it too, though she wouldn't admit it. For the first time all night, she looked unsure. Aaliyah moved slowly toward the piano bench, her cane tapping lightly against the floor, each tap echoing louder than the whispers rippling through the hall. The room held its breath. People leaned forward in their chairs, waiting for the spectacle they thought they were about to witness. A blind black girl attempting Rachmaninoff? To them, it sounded like comedy disguised charity. Ashley kept her smile tight, but her fingers fidgeted with the bracelet on her wrist. She had expected hesitation, trembling, maybe even tears. Instead, Aaliyah's calmness felt unnatural, too controlled, too focused. It gnawed at something in Ashley she rarely felt in public. Doubt. Danielle, standing quietly at the edge of the room, watched her niece's posture shift, the straightening of shoulders, the slight, tilt of her chin. It was the same stance she'd seen years ago, right before Aaliyah played for the community center for the first time and left 100 people stunned into silence. Aaliyah reached the piano bench and let her fingers slide along its edge until she found the exact center. She lowered herself gracefully, the way someone trained, not someone fumbling. Guests exchanged glances. Even those who came expecting humiliation sensed that something wasn't aligning with the script they'd written in their minds. Ashley stepped beside her, voice sharp. "Remember, dear, Rachmaninoff is no small task. Even I didn't attempt it at your age." Aaliyah didn't respond, not because she was intimidated, but because she was listening to the room, to the vibration of every footstep, to the hum of lights, to the breath patterns of 100 people anticipating failure. Danielle always told her, "You don't need eyes when you can hear the truth." And right now, the truth was loud. Ashley cleared her throat. "Well, are you ready to begin?" Aaliyah lifted her hands but didn't touch the keys yet. Her fingers hovered, confident, steady, familiar. A murmur spread through the crowd. A few people whispered, "Does she know what she's doing?" Another said, "She looks too comfortable." Ashley's stomach tightened. Aaliyah inhaled deeply, and for a moment, everything fell silent. Her lips parted just enough for a whisper meant only for those closest to hear. "I don't need to see the keys. I memorized this hall's acoustics the moment I walked in." Guests froze. Even Ashley's breath hitched. If you believe talent can silence every insult, share this video. And to everyone watching from the US, UK, and Canada, your voice matters. Aaliyah lowered her hands, and then her fingers touched the piano, not with hesitation, not with fear, but with the certainty of someone who has been waiting her whole life for this exact moment. The first chord struck the air like a crack in the marble floor. Deep, precise, alive. Conversations died instantly. Glasses stopped midair. Even the servers froze. The hall, built for perfect acoustics, carried the sound across every corner with a haunting clarity no one expected from a girl they had dismissed minutes earlier. Aaliyah didn't ease into the piece. She claimed it. Her fingers moved through the opening passages with an authority that erased every assumption floating in the room. The softness of the left-hand progression, the sudden swell of the right. It wasn't just accurate. It was devastatingly intentional. People exchanged stunned glances. A man in the second row whispered, "She's playing it flawlessly." His companion leaned forward, disbelief tightening her voice. This isn't beginner-level talent." Ashley's smile collapsed into a tight, trembling line. She recognized the technique instantly. Precise wrist control, perfect dynamics, emotional phrasing beyond her own performances. This wasn't luck. This was mastery. Aaliyah's hair brushed her cheek as she leaned into the keys, feeling every vibration, guiding every shift and emotion. Each note carried a story: loss, struggle, resilience, and the hall felt like a weight pressing into their ribs. The conductor seated near the aisle, Bradley, adjusted his glasses with shaking hands. "Impossible," he muttered. "She's interpreting it like someone who studied under a master." Danielle allowed herself one quiet breath of pride. Only she knew the truth. Aaliyah had trained for years under a retired genius no one here had bothered to remember. A man overlooked because he wasn't white, wealthy, or flashy. But he gave Aaliyah something these people couldn't buy: depth. As the second movement began, the shift in tone hit the room like confession. The sadness, the rage, the hope clawing its way out of darkness. Guests who had laughed earlier now stared with wide eyes, some gripping the armrests of their chairs. One woman whispered, I feel this in my chest." Ashley felt something else. Shame. Burning, choking shame. Because Aaliyah wasn't just playing. She was exposing her. Every smug comment, every condescending word, every racist assumption embedded in Ashley's performance. And she was doing it without ever looking at her. Bradley stood up suddenly, not in outrage, but reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen, this girl isn't just talented. She's extraordinary." Gasps followed. Phones lifted. People captured the moment because they knew this was history. Aaliyah's fingers flew through the final cascade of notes. The last chord hung in the air like a hell breath. Then silence. Heavy, spiritual, unavoidable. Ashley's world tilted. This wasn't the humiliation she planned. This was revelation. A revelation that proved everyone in that hall had judged the wrong person. The silence after the final chord didn't feel empty. It felt stunned. 100 people sat frozen, blinking as if they needed time to understand what had just unfolded in front of them. Then, like a dam cracking under pressure, the room erupted, not in laughter, not in pity, but in awe. Chairs scraped as people stood. Applause thundered against the gold panel walls. Some clapped with both hands. Others covered their mouths with trembling fingers. A few had tears streaming down their faces, unsure whether they were crying for Aaliyah's brilliance or for their own shame. Aaliyah sat still, listening. She didn't need sight to know the applause felt different. Sincere, overwhelmed, apologetic. The kind people give when they realize they misjudged someone they should have honored. But Ashley didn't clap. She couldn't. Her fingers dug into the edge of the piano as her vision blurred. For the first time in her polished, comfortable career, she wasn't the center of attention. She wasn't the star, the genius, the symbol of high culture. She was the villain. Bradley, the conductor, approached the stage with an expression that bordered on reverence. "Young lady," he said, voice trembling. That was one of the most profound interpretations of Rachmaninoff I've ever witnessed, and I've been conducting for 30 years. A gasp rippled through the hall. Ashley's stomach flipped. That kind of praise wasn't casual. It was career-defining. And for the first time, it was directed at someone else. Someone she had tried to crush. For the record, Bradley continued, turning to the crowd. If this girl wants a place in any academy, conservatory, or program I'm affiliated with, she has it. The applause grew louder, more insistent. Aaliyah lowered her head slightly. Gratitude warmed her chest, but she stayed composed. She wasn't here to taunt anyone. She didn't need to. Her talent had done the talking. Ashley stumbled back a step. A woman from the front row, one of the event organizers, stood and pointed a sharp look her way. "How could you?" She snapped quietly, not for drama, but disgust. Mocking a child with a gift like this? Others joined. Unbelievable. Shameful. She tried to humiliate her and ended up humiliating herself. Ashley's face flushed red. She wanted to defend herself, to twist the narrative like she always did. But the evidence was too loud, the performance too flawless, the crowd too united. Her reputation wasn't cracking, it was collapsing. Meanwhile, Aaliyah stood with Danielle's guiding hand, and the room parted around her like a tide. People reached out to shake her hand, to apologize, to praise her, to tell her she had changed something inside them. And for once, Ashley Hartwell, the celebrated untouchable star, was invisible. Justice didn't need to shout tonight. It played through Aaliyah's hands, and the whole hall heard it. When applause finally softened, the room felt different, lighter, humbled, awake. People who had entered with stiff backs and colder hearts now looked at Aaliyah with something rare in elite rooms like this: respect. Danielle guided her toward the side of the stage, making sure she didn't stumble on the steps. But Aaliyah didn't feel weak. She felt taller somehow, as if every note she played had built a new part of her spine. The warmth in her chest wasn't pride. It was relief. Relief that the music she carried alone for years had finally been heard. Bradley caught up to them, breathless, still shaken. "Aaliyah, if you're willing," he hesitated, searching for the right words. "I'd like to help arrange an audition at a conservatory. You don't belong on the sidelines. You belong on the world's biggest stages." Aaliyah smiled faintly. "Thank you," she said softly. "I just wanted them to hear me. Really hear me." Across the hall, Ashley stood alone near a pillar, shoulders slumped, mascara smudged. She didn't look like the flawless star who had strutted on stage earlier. She looked small, exposed, and no longer applauded. A woman approached her, not to comfort, but to confront. "You humiliated yourself tonight. That girl showed more grace than you ever have." Ashley didn't respond. She had no defense, no excuse strong enough to survive the truth that had been played into the air. Reputation wasn't something she could rebuild with apologies. Not tonight. Not after this. Aaliyah didn't turn toward Ashley. Didn't gloat. Didn't throw back a single insult. Justice didn't always need a voice. Sometimes it only needed silence. Danielle squeezed her niece's hand. "Baby," she whispered, "your parents would have been proud." Aaliyah lowered her chin, letting the words settle deep. Music had carried her through the darkness of losing them. Tonight, it carried her somewhere brighter. As they stepped toward the exit, people stood again, not clapping, just watching with admiration that felt genuine. Aaliyah couldn't see their faces, but she felt their shift. The same people who doubted her minutes ago now parted to let her walk forward, toward a life she had earned note by note. Share this if you believe stories like this should never happen again, and subscribe for more dark truths.